No man will have her, they said, until a cowboy walked into the auction and pointed at her. The auction block smelled of sweat, whiskey, and dust baked under the Kansas sun. Eliza Hart stood tall despite the shackles of humiliation that bound her tighter than any iron chain. Her dress, once a decent calico for Sunday service, clung limp from too many washings. A strand of auburn hair slipped from its pin and fell across her cheek, but she dared not raise a hand to brush it back. Instead, her palms gripped the small shoulders of the children pressed against her skirts. Sarah, age 9, with wide eyes red from weeping, and her brother Thomas, barely 6, who gnawed his lip until it bled. No man will have her, someone muttered from the crowd. A sneer rolled through the air like tumbleweed. Trouble since she was born. Trouble still. The auctioneer slapped his palm against the warped plank counter. Her father's debt stand. Property seized and she's... What's left? Who'll take her? Strong seamstress. Can cook. 2 children come along, no extra charge. A roar of laughter burst from the saloon doors, cruel and cutting. Eliza closed her eyes a moment, swallowing shame. Her father's gambling had been a weight on her back since she could remember. He'd died leaving nothing but sorrow and a sheriff's ledger scrawled in red. The foreman of Whitfield Ranch stepped forward. He was a thick man with beefy hands, his face weathered but his eyes cold as gunmetal. $50 and a roof for her, ain't worth more. He spat brown, tobacco juice into the dirt and smirked. Best she'll get. A ripple of approval ran through the crowd. Women whispered, men chuckled. Eliza tightened her hold on Sarah and Thomas. She could feel their trembling through her skirts. Rage pricked her chest, but it tangled with despair. Was this what her life had come to? Traded like a mule in front of jeering neighbors? $50! The auctioneer barked. Do I hear more? Eliza's throat burned. She wanted to shout, I am more than this, but the words stuck. She thought of her mother's voice long gone. Keep your dignity, Eliza, even when the world would take it. But dignity seemed far away. The foreman's grin widened. He reached out, curling his fingers as if to seize her already. Sarah whimpered. Eliza shut her eyes against the sting of tears. Then a voice rang out, steady, low, like a river cutting through stone. I'll pay her debt. The crowd turned. At the edge of the dust-blown street stood a man astride a bay horse, hat tipped low, coat worn but cared for. His face was sun-browned, jaw square, eyes hidden in the shade of his brim. He swung down with unhurried grace and tossed a leather pouch onto the counter. The thud of silver coins silenced the laughter. The auctioneer blinked. Why, that's 3 times the debt. The stranger's gaze slid past the jeers and landed on Eliza. Calm, unwavering. He said only, She owes me nothing she doesn't choose. Gasps whispered like prairie wind. The foreman's jaw tightened. Eliza's heart thudded as if the earth itself had shifted beneath her feet. The crowd buzzed with disbelief, a low growl of voices rippling outward like a fire catching dry grass. No one paid that kind of silver for a woman with a gambler's stain on her name, not in Abilene, not anywhere west of the Mississippi. The foreman's hand curled into a fist. You think you can walk in here, stranger, and snatch what's mine? His spit hit the dust between them, a challenge. The cowboy removed his hat, sweeping it briefly against his thigh before setting it, back on his head. His hair was dark, streaked lighter from the sun, his eyes gray as storm clouds when they finally lifted to meet the foreman's. You never owned her, he said, voice quiet but firm. Not with coin, not with words. A woman ain't cattle. Ah, murmurs swept through the onlookers, half mocking, half uneasy. Some spat. Others shifted on their boots. No one ever spoke that way at an auction block. Eliza could scarcely breathe. Sarah clung tighter to her, and little Thomas peeked from behind her skirts, with open wonder. She felt their hope rising like a fragile bubble, and she wanted to crush it before the world did. But she couldn't take her eyes off the man who had stepped into her shame and turned it into defiance. The auctioneer cleared his throat nervously, nudging the pouch of coins with a stubby finger. Well, law says debt settled means she's free to go. Sheriff will write it down, clean as day. The foreman shoved his way forward, his face mottled red. You'll regret crossing me, Merrick. So that was his name. Cole Merrick. She tucked it away like a secret talisman. Cole didn't so much as flinch. He extended a hand, not in ownership, not in command, but in offer. Come if you want, Miss Hart. If not, I'll ride on and think no less. Her throat closed. Every pair of eyes in Abilene seemed fixed on her, waiting. If she refused, she'd remain here, humiliated, marked, with the foreman circling like a wolf. If she went with this stranger, she gambled again, but at least the choice would be hers. Slowly, she laid her hand in his. Calloused fingers closed. Around hers, steady, strong, not dragging, simply holding. The crowd erupted. Some jeered, some cursed, a few even cheered, but Eliza hardly heard them. She felt the tremble of her children pressed close as Cole lifted them both onto his horse with surprising gentleness. Then he turned to her. Can you ride? He asked. She swallowed. I'll manage. He nodded, swung into the saddle, and reached for her. For a heartbeat, she froze, then let him pull her up behind Thomas. The horse shifted beneath them, muscles taut, ready to run. As Cole clicked his tongue and the bay leapt into motion, dust rose in a golden cloud. Behind them, the foreman's curse cut through the din. You'll pay for this, Merrick, Eliza. Wrapped her arms around Sarah and Thomas, holding them steady. Her cheek brushed the coarse fabric of Cole's coat, and she closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she was not being led against her will. She was riding away. The prairie stretched endless as the sky, its grasses whispering secrets in the dusk wind. Hours passed before the thundering hooves slowed, before the town's noise was only memory. Cole Merrick's ranch rose from the horizon like something, shaped by endurance rather than luck. A weathered cabin with a leaning porch, a small barn, and fields that thirsted for rain. Eliza slid stiffly from the horse, helping Sarah and Thomas down. Their eyes were wide with awe. They had never known open space, not hemmed by neighbors' gossip or the sheriff's glare. Cole swung down and uncinched his saddle with easy, practiced motions. Ain't much, he said, nodding toward the cabin. But it's honest. You can rest here till you decide your road. Eliza bristled at the kindness laced in that word. Decide. No man had spoken it to her in years. Her instinct was to mistrust it, yet something in his steady tone disarmed her. She only managed a small nod. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine sap and wood smoke. The hearth was swept clean, a quilt folded with care across the rocker. On the table, a Bible lay open, pages soft with use. It felt lived in, not lonely. She busied herself with what she knew, shaking out flour from her small sack, stoking the fire, setting bread to rise. The children gathered wildflowers by the fence, their laughter tumbling across the yard like bells. For the first time since her father's debts had crushed their days, she felt a sliver of peace slide into her chest. Cole returned from the barn with a handful of seeds and an awkward shrug. Thought maybe you and the little ones might want to plant a garden come spring. Soil's tough, but it'll yield if you coax it. She took the packet, fingers brushing his. A garden means hope, she murmured before she could stop herself. He met her eyes, gray as a rainstorm, promising water, and she quickly turned back to the bread dough. But whispers of threat had a way of traveling faster than prairie wind. At night, When the children slept curled together, Eliza sat by lamplight, pen scratching across paper. Letters she might never send. Words to her mother long buried, promises to her children of futures she wasn't sure she could keep. Cole passed quietly, never asking, only leaving fresh ink and paper on the table when she ran low. Still, shadows grew. Once, she found the barn door unlatched, though she knew she'd closed it. Another night, hoofbeats echoed in the dark, far too near. The foreman had not forgotten. His kind never did. By day, she cooked stews and patched shirts, watching Cole teach Thomas to whittle or Sarah to tie knots. By night, she lay awake listening to the wolves outside and the harsher wolves she knew were men. Safety was not promised. Here, but for the first time in years, respect was, and that she realized was worth defending. The storm came without warning, a black bruise rolling across the horizon. The wind howled through the cottonwoods, rattling the shutters, and the first crack of thunder split the prairie night. Eliza had just set the children by the fire when she heard it, the grind of hooves on wet earth, too many to be friendly. Cole's hand brushed the rifle by the door. His eyes, calm as ever, flicked to hers. "It's him," she whispered, throat tight. He nodded once. "Stay low. Keep the little ones close." But Eliza's heart rebelled at the thought of cowering. She had hidden long enough, in debt, in shame, in silence. Tonight she would not. The foreman's voice boomed over the storm. "Merrick, hand her over, or we'll burn you out!" Lightning lit the yard, and for a moment she saw them. 5 riders, slickers glistening, faces twisted in hunger for power. Cole leveled his rifle at the window but didn't fire. He waited, steady as stone. Eliza slipped to the back door, mind racing. She remembered the gullies by the creek, how the rain made them into sudden rivers. If she could lead the riders that way, the land itself would turn against them. She found a lantern, shielded its light, and moved swift as she dared. Mud sucked at her boots. Rain plastered her hair to her face, but she kept running until she circled behind the riders. With shaking hands, she hurled the lantern onto the heap of brush piled near the gully's edge. Flames leapt, crackling against the rain. "Fire!" one man shouted. In the chaos, horses reared, men cursed, and Eliza's voice cut sharp through the storm. "Come and take me if you dare!" The foreman's head snapped around, rage lighting his face. He spurred his horse after her, not seeing the ground give way. The animal plunged, hooves flailing as it slid into the swollen gully. The other riders balked, pulling back. Cole's rifle cracked, the shot kicking up dirt by their boots. His voice carried, low and lethal. "Next shot won't miss." The storm swallowed their curses as the riders wheeled away, leaving their leader scrambling in the mud below. Cole ran to Eliza, rain streaking his face. "You could have been killed," he said, voice raw. She stood trembling, soaked through, yet fiercer than she'd ever felt. "I won't be owned again. Not by him, not by anyone." For the first time, his composure broke. He reached, cupped her face, gray eyes blazing. "Then stand with me, Eliza, by choice, not fear." Lightning flared, thunder rolled, and in its light she saw herself clearly, not broken, not traded, but choosing. She nodded once, breath catching. By choice. Behind them, the fire hissed in the rain, smoke rising like a signal. A woman had fought and lived free. Morning came pale and trembling after the storm, the prairie washed clean, the air rich with the smell of wet earth. Eliza stepped out onto the cabin's porch, her skirts damp at the hem, and saw Sarah and Thomas chasing each other through the puddles. Their laughter was sharp and bright, cutting through the memory of gunfire and thunder like sunlight after too many winters. Cole stood by the fence, mending a broken rail. His movements were steady, quiet. as though nothing had changed. Yet everything had. When he looked up, his eyes found hers with a certainty that made her knees weak. The foreman was gone. Whether he drowned in the gully or slunk back to town, no one could say. What mattered was the absence of his shadow. The cabin, battered though it was, stood whole. The land remained theirs to till. And Eliza's heart, her heart felt unshackled. That morning, she pressed a small apple sapling into the earth near the porch, Sarah and Thomas patting soil over its roots with eager hands. "Trees take patience," she told them, "but one day you'll sit in its shade." Cole lingered at her shoulder, his hands muddy from the fence. "That tree'll outlive us both," he said softly. She glanced at him, at the way his words carried no claim, only promise. "Then it'll carry our mark," she answered. Inside the cabin, her letters lay unfinished. She took one up, dipped the pen, and began anew, not to the dead, but to the living. "To tomorrow," she wrote, "and the home we'll build from courage, not fear." Her hand trembled as she signed her name, but not from weakness, from strength. That night, by the fire, Cole read aloud to the children from his Bible. Eliza mended a tear in Thomas's shirt, her needle flashing in the glow. The storm outside had passed, yet the memory of it lingered like an anthem. They had stood, they had chosen, they had endured. When Cole's voice trailed off, he caught her gaze across the fire. "Eliza," he said, quiet but sure. "You and the little ones. You belong here, if you'll have it." She met his eyes, and the world steadied. "We already do." The flames cracked, the apple sapling whispered in the wind, and something deeper than survival settled into her bones. Belonging, love, purpose. And so Eliza Hart, once called trouble and unwanted, carved her place in the wild frontier. Not as a prize bought or a burden carried, but as a woman who chose and was chosen in return. If Eliza's courage and heart touched something quiet and true inside your soul, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Out here in the Wild West, love may be hard won, but it's always worth the fight. Join us for more stories of grit, sacrifice, and hearts that endure against all odds.